Travelling northwards from Pretoria in South Africa, we crossed the border into Botswana at Martin's Drift on the Limpopo River. The A1 Botswana highway then took us northeastward to Francistown. There we turned northwest and headed towards the dusty little town of Nata. During the last 20 kilometers into Nata, the habitat on both sides of the tarmac road was marked by some very heavy elephant feeding damage. He told us we were at last in elephant territory, and I was under no illusions. I knew that what we had seen near Nata that afternoon was just one small taste of greater elephant habitat destruction still to come. From Nata northwards to Kasane, a distance of 360 kilometers, the main road hugged the international border with Zimbabwe, never getting any further from Wankie National Park's western boundary than 10 kilometers. I began to feel at home. I had cut my baby game ranger teeth in this Kalahari sand habitat in the early 1960s. Approximately 50 kilometers beyond Nata, we turned left off the tarmac and suddenly arrived at a small and very rustic private game lodge called Elephant Sands. This was our planned final destination for the day. The water gushed out of a steel pipe that had been set solid in a large and heavy concrete block located on the water's edge. At the time of our arrival, some 50-odd elephant bulls were concentrated around the freshwater pipe, drinking their fill, or bathing in the big pool's slightly muddy water. Half a dozen tourists sitting on deck chairs were gathered close to the concrete block, which lay alongside the visitor reception centre's veranda. The guests were soaking up the dangerous ambience of the nearby elephants. There were a dozen sleeping lodges arranged in a ring around the pan, 50 meters apart at a distance of some 100 meters from the water's edge. Our journey that day had covered 763 kilometers, and the heat that day had taken its toll. We were all tired and heavily dehydrated. We unpacked our katunda into our allocated sleeping quarters and returned to the reception centre, where we ordered a cold beer from the bar and sat down with others to enjoy the jumbos. The elephants were not at all bothered with the close human presence. They were quite content to just stand in the water, to bathe in the pool, to drink the clean fresh water from the steel pipe, and to ignore the people. They were, it seemed, inured to the very close proximity of their human audience. And as the evening advanced, so more and more bull elephants came to the water. After a pleasant light supper, Ian, Elmer and I walked around the pan, avoiding contact with the elephants at the water's edge, and we retired to our sleeping quarters for the night. We slept like the dead. Barry Skinstad, our cameraman, stayed up with the elephants well into the night. He told me the next morning that individual elephant bulls had come to the water alone and had left the water alone throughout the night. I wasn't surprised, because that is their nature. Elephant Sands is a perfect place for visitors to observe these important facets of elephant behavior. I remembered this area from the 1960s, when I first patrolled the Zimbabwe-Botswana border regions of Wankie National Park on horseback. In those days, the habitats hereabouts were mature deciduous woodlands of some significance. Today, all the trees are gone, completely gone, and the once common thick bush understory is now just a wasteland of naked Kalahari sand. This thanks to the provision of artificial waterholes and a massive number of elephants it attracted. This is a good time and place to explain that we had come to Botswana specifically to film the impact that the elephants were having on their habitats. That is exactly what we had done the previous week inside Kruger National Park in South Africa. But there is a very great difference between the conditions that pertained in Kruger and those that exist in Botswana. Here are some scientific facts and definitions that you simply have to know if you want to deliberate the subject of elephant population management. 1. A population can be defined as a group of animals of the same species, the individuals of which interact with each other on a daily basis and which breed only with other animals in the same group. 2. Sustainable elephant carrying capacity is the maximum number of elephants that a game reserve or habitat can carry without them causing permanent damage to the vegetation. It is vital for a wildlife manager to know what his game reserve's elephant carrying capacity is. Very few of them, however, are knowledgeable about the subject. Those that don't understand its significance, however, cannot conceive even the most basic of their wildlife management objectives, which is maintaining species diversity. Botswana is part host to one mega elephant population. Mega simply means that the population size is unusually large. Botswana's mega elephant population is officially said to number 220,000. Some say it is as high as 250,000. This mega elephant population is shared between 5 countries: Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. This combined group of countries, which are trying to create a single wildlife management conglomerate, call themselves Kaza, the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, the KZA-TFCA. Kaza is a great idea, but it is fraught with major elephant population management problems. Management is the action that man takes to achieve a man-desired objective. There is nothing natural about wildlife management. It is man-conceived, man-designed, man-implemented, man-manipulated, and man is the principal beneficiary. Why is man the principal beneficiary? Because it is man's objective that is attained. Now consider these simple but important rules of wildlife management. Maintaining habitats in a healthy and robust condition is far more important than looking after the animals that are ecologically adapted to live within them. One must understand that without the existence of their specific habitat, no species of mammal, insect, bird, reptile, or fish will survive. But when their special habitats are maintained in good health, the animals themselves will require little or no management supervision from man. One might say, therefore, that it is the wildlife manager's principal purpose in a game reserve or national park not to look after the wild animals per se, but to look after the health and the vigor of their habitats. Man cannot manage an animal species, such as the African elephant, which is why there is no such thing as an endangered species. Man can only manage an animal species' different populations, then only one at a time. Furthermore, he can only determine each population's management needs by comparing its numerical abundance in relation to the habitat's sustainable elephant carrying capacity. Let me explain something else. According to Kaza's Chief Research Officer, Dr. Russell Taylor, Kaza is 520,000 square kilometers, or 200,000 square miles in extent. According to Botswana, Kaza is carrying 220,000 elephants. That number equates to 1 elephant per 2.4 square kilometers, or 12 elephants per 5 square kilometers. When 1 elephant per 5 square kilometers is the most likely elephant carrying capacity for Kaza's Kalahari sand type habitats. That being the case, Kaza is carrying 12 times too many elephants, and it has been carrying those far too many elephants for far too long. If you're going to understand how elephant management, also known as conservation, works, you are going to have to pay attention to the following graphs, which I will explain as we go along. Graph 1. The vertical columns in all these graphs represent 10-year or 1 decade periods. Each lateral layer equates to 10% of a habitat's elephant carrying capacity. 100% is when the habitat reaches the point of elephant saturation. Another way of expressing saturation is to say that the habitat achieves its sustainable elephant carrying capacity at the 100% level on the graph. The shallow S-shaped line running from the bottom left-hand corner of the graph to the top center right illustrates elephant population growth starting off from 0 at day 1 to 100%, which is achieved after 70 years. Thereafter, population growth levels off. In other words, it stabilizes at 100%. Population growth is achieved by way of immigration and births, and curtailment of growth occurs because of emigration and deaths. Stability is achieved after 70 years of growth, when immigration and births equals emigration and deaths. 100% equals the habitat's elephant carrying capacity. Immigration is encouraged when the elephant habitat becomes overcrowded and when food resources therein become limiting. The elephants disperse into new environments in search of new Lebensraum and greater food supplies, but it is not as simple as it sounds. When the sanctuary's environment is invaded by man, for example, elephant cowherds vacate their old habitats only when the human population reaches 15 people per square kilometre or 40 people per square mile. And the cowherds will not move into new habitats that are inhabited by man at this kind of human population density. Elephant bulls are not so readily scared off by people, and only bull elephants ever raid the people's crops.
Get out, get out, get out, get on the car, get on the car, get on the car, get on the car, get on the car.
Get on the car right now.
Hey, hey,
In my 60 years of association with crop raiding elephants, I have never seen a cowherd raiding a human crop. Graph 2. At an annual incremental rate of 7.2%, which is attained by the population's middle period growth phase, elephant populations double their numbers every 10 years. Here, during its 5th decade of growth, the population here illustrated increased from 40% to 80%, doubling the population's number in 1 decade. Up to this point in a population's growth pattern, up to the 70 or 80% level, immigration rarely takes place because the population's food and Lebensraum needs are being satisfied. And when immigration does not take place, perhaps because increasing human populations box them in, elephant populations continue to double their numbers in their old habitat every 10 years. And the population growth line continues straight upwards on the graph, through and beyond the 100% carrying capacity ceiling. Graph 3. Once they have broken through the 100% ceiling, elephant populations become what are called excessive. This means there are too many elephants for the habitats to sustainably carry. Thereafter, the habitats continually lose soil, and they lose plant and animal species too. That means species diversity is lost. Nevertheless, the elephant populations continue to double their numbers every 10 years. This means 1,000 elephants become 2,000, become 4,000, become 8,000, become 16,000 ad infinitum. And that rate of population increase continues for the next 50 or 60 years until the habitat completely runs out of food. It only stops when the elephant population crashes, that is, when it incurs massive population deaths consequent upon habitat change and the extirpation of food plants, occasioned by overuse. Graph 4. This graph illustrates what I have just explained in Graph 3. Note, starting from day 1, the population size has doubled every 10 years. Early in the 6th decade, the graph line passes straight through the 100% ceiling, but it doesn't stop there. It continues crawling skyward. At the end of the 6th decade, it reaches 160% of the habitat's sustainable elephant carrying capacity. At the end of the 7th decade, it reaches 320%, and it continues to increase in number every year. But we don't have to labor that point anymore. We hopefully have made it clear. Classifying and managing elephant populations. 1. When an elephant population is numerically far below the carrying capacity of its habitat and its numbers are declining, we say that population is unsafe or threatened. Unsafe populations should be managed according to the principle of preservation management, which affords that population total protection from all harm. 2. When an elephant population is numerically at or close to the carrying capacity of its habitat, and it is breeding well, we say that population is safe, and safe populations should be managed according to the principle of conservation management. This requires that the population be culled and or hunted every year in order to maintain the population at its most desirable safe number. Culling is the removal of the population's annual increment, that is, its annual natural increase in number, and it stops the population from becoming excessive. 3. When an elephant population is numerically well above the carrying capacity of its habitat, we say that population is excessive, and all excessive populations are without any doubt causing permanent damage to their habitats. This in turn means the sanctuary will be losing plant and animal species all the time.
Okay, let's stop there.
Excessive populations should be managed according to the principle of population reduction management. This requires that in the very first year of such a management regime, the population number should be reduced by at least 50%. And that in the second year, the already depleted standing population, if necessary, should be reduced by yet another 50%. And this drastic reduction management action should be continued, if necessary, every year until the population is reduced to a numerical level that the habitat can sustainably carry. 5. Population reduction management is unavoidable wherever excessive populations exist. Why? Because wherever excessive populations exist, biological diversity is being squandered. Now I can explain the elephant population reduction management step that I believe needs to be taken in Kaza right now. Remember, I have previously calculated that this sanctuary's current elephant population at 220,000 is 12 times greater than my calculated ideal elephant carrying capacity figure for this sanctuary, which is 1 elephant per 5 square kilometers. So we have a lot of room in which to maneuver. The management recommendation for any grossly excessive elephant population, as is the case in Kaza at this time, as a first action necessity, should be to reduce the standing population size by 50%, and if necessary, second, third and fourth management actions should be repeats of the first management action every year, all with the objective of reducing the standing population to below the 100% level again. On this graph you will see that we have installed a vertical red line downwards from the 320% level point, signifying a reduction of the population size by 50%. This drops the population number down to 160% level, which is 60% higher than the desired maximum of 100%. We then installed a green line downwards from the 160% point, which reduces the population size by a second 50% of the standing population size. This reduces the population down to the 80% level, which is below the 100% ceiling, the carrying capacity level. The second management activity, therefore, achieves our desired management goal. The population can then be reclassified as being safe, whereafter it should be managed according to the normal annual safe conservation management program. Preservation management, conservation management, and population reduction management all have one thing in common. They are all designed to protect habitats and their animal populations from permanent damage, and by reason of that most critical of all wildlife management desiderata, they are all designed to protect species diversity. The production of ivory, elephant hide, and meat has nothing to do with elephant management. Management is concerned solely with maintaining a balanced and healthy relationship between elephant populations and their habitats. When safe and/or excessive populations are managed according to the principles of preservation management, total protection from all harm, that constitutes mismanagement. And that is what the misguided and ignorant International Animal Rights Brigade are trying to force on Africa all the time.
We are the children of